So it's time for another book special, and this month we're talking Twinners. Hi everyone, I'm Dave Musson at Dave Musson on Instagram. This is a place where I talk to you about all things Stephen King. Have a look in the description for links to my Stephen King trivia book that I published, links to my newsletter, the Constant Writers podcast where I talk to indie horror authors about them, their work, and Stephen King, links to my fiction, and links to my Letterboxd profile as well, where you can see what I'm watching and watch my Stephen King ranking as it progresses. So if you're a regular around here, you'll know that once a month I do a book special, and this video is this month's book special. And as I've already said, it's about Twinners. So Twinners are a concept from the Dark Tower mythology of Stephen King's bibliography, and basically the idea is that out there in all those other worlds than these, there is a twin version of us, another version of us, or at least for most of us anyway. So yeah, that's basically what Twinners are. They're like us, very similar, but also often a little bit different. Slightly different outcomes, slightly different appearance sometimes, slightly different motivations. And that's kind of the driving force behind this book special. So what I wanted to do was basically start at Carrie and go through 19 pairs of books that I think are Twinners. These might be Twinners because of them sharing a theme, maybe sharing an event, sharing some key characters, or just kind of a general vibe. So these are my ideas. Do let me know your ideas for Twinners in the comments, and be rest assured that this is going to be as spoiler-free as possible. I don't think I'm planning to spoil any of the key moments of any of these books, so you should be good to watch. So, I don't know how this will go. Let's see what we can come up with. Here are my 19 sets of Twinners, and this is something I might come back to because I'm going through in chronological order from Carrie. It only takes us up to the mid-90s, so we might have to do the rest. But yeah, let's get on with it, because I don't really know what else to say. Haha! Okay, so we're starting with Carrie, and my Twinner suggestion for Carrie, quite an obvious one, is Firestarter. We've got young women in both who can do things with their minds, and, well, both are quite explosive, I guess. And kind of both of these are a bit science fiction-y and fun, aren't they, really? So next up we have Salem's Lot, and I'm twinning that with the Tommyknockers. So both of these, small towns, big casts, dark secret, weird shit going down. Obviously Salem's Lot is much better than the Tommyknockers, but I think they work well as a pairing. There's kind of the well thought out, well edited, just really well written version here, and then the maxed out on cocaine right before getting clean version over here. It's like two sides of an extreme. So next up we've got The Shining. Now the obvious choice here as a twinner would have been to go to Dr. Sleep, which is its sequel, but I thought that was cheating way too much. So instead, I have a Bag of Bones. But both of these books are ghost stories in effect. Both of these books see troubled lead characters who happen to be writers of sorts, dealing with demons and ghosts from their past and finding themselves in scarily haunted places. I think, yeah, they just work well as a pairing. And next up, The Stand. Now again, an obvious choice might have been to go for Cell because of the post-apocalyptic end of the world thing, but I've actually picked The Talisman, which King co-wrote with Peter Straub, mainly because they're both just epic quests. Epic adventures. But also I don't really like either of them that much. But that's not the reason I put them as a twinner. I just think it's a slightly different approach than just going with Cell for this. And yeah, I think the scope of both of these books really does see them working well as twinners. And if you want to understand the concept of twinners, then The Talisman is the one you really need to read. So next up we've got my favourite, The Dead Zone, and I've paired it with 11/22/63. Both books that have, well, these two books probably have King's best romances in them. I thought that was a strong link between them. And both of them are looking at kind of consequence and what would happen if you could go to some point and change what you know to be a key moment in history and what might happen afterwards. And also they're both just wonderful books that I would genuinely recommend to any reader, even if they're not Stephen King fans. You don't need to be into horror to enjoy either of these books. And they both cover a range of genres as well, so they really do appeal to a wide group of readers. And next up is Cujo, and I've paired that with Gerald's Game. Now, you might have assumed I would pair Gerald's Game with Dolores Claiborne because they are linked, and I nearly did, but the theme here, the reason they're twinned, is claustrophobia. Both of these books are intensely claustrophobic. Small settings, small casts, and both have a dog in as well. And just really difficult, impossible situations to try and get out of. And both featuring really excellent female lead characters as well. And next up, Christine, everyone's favourite or least favourite car. And I have gone for an obvious twinning here. I've gone for From a Buick 8, another quite dastardly car. And that's about it, really. I mean, the books, in terms of similarities, are wildly different from each other. We've got Cocaine King to the max here. We've got very thoughtful post-accident King here, who doesn't really want to give you answers, just wants to tell a strange story. But they've both got spooky cars in them, so there we go. And next up is Pet Sematary, one of King's absolute best and one of my favourites. And I'm pairing it with Revival. I think both of these books deal with grief and death in incredibly powerful ways. Both got wonderful writing about those subjects, and both reveal quite terrifying prospects about what might happen after death. So they seem like natural twinners to me. And next up, Eyes of the Dragon, and I'm pairing it with Fairy Tale because fantasy, right? I mean, they're both fairy tale type stories. This one was written by King for his daughter as a fairy tale, and this one is his very recent attempt to reinvent the fairy tale. Not particularly well, but we'll leave that for another day. Anyway, they're both fantasy books, so if you like fantasy, these are the two. Next up, Thinner, one of his Bachman books. I'm just conscious I've missed out The Running Man and The Long Walk and Rage. I'll have to do that next time I do the Twinners. But we've got Thinner, and I've paired it with Elevation for quite obvious reasons. Both about weight loss, but one much more terrifying than the other. And again, it's kind of interesting to see these two stories that have broadly the same subject, but were written at very different points in King's career. Again, 80s King here and 2018 King here. You can really see how he's changed and mellowed over time, and yet how his storytelling chops have not got any weaker in the slightest. And next up, we've got It, and I am twinning this with Dreamcatcher. Not only because of the Derry connection and the fact that there are references to people from here in here, but also at the heart of both are a group of lifelong friends from Derry. And the best parts of Dreamcatcher are where we've got the core four together, and that mirrors some of the best parts in It as well, where we've got the Losers Club together. That value of friendship that both of these books have means that they are natural twinners to me. So Misery, I'm going to pair this one with Lisey's story, mainly because of how both of them offer viewpoints of what fandom is, and what it means to be a fan. So we've got Annie Wilkes here, and we've got Zach McCool in here. Both fascinating portrayals of fandom, and I guess both really interesting looks at what it's like to be a writer as well. And again, as with some of these other twinnings, we've got that perspective. We've got 80s, we've got mid-noughts. So a really interesting pairing to see how King's views on his fans and on himself and on his own craft have changed over time. Okay, next up, The Dark Half, and I'm twinning that with Billy Summers because both of these books look at identity and multiple identities and what it means to swap around and what the consequences might be. I mean, this one is pretty nasty at times, and this one does have some nasty moments as well. But again, I feel like they sort of work as a twinning. Let me know what you think. So next, chronologically, is Needful Things. And well, the only natural twinner with this bombastic explosion of a chaotic book has to be Under the Dome. Both small towns put in impossible situations that just leads to utter carnage. So yeah, natural twinners in my book. And both driven by some quite nasty, power-hungry people. The next up we've got Dolores Claiborne. Now you already know I've not paired this with Gerald's Game, which this book is linked to. Instead, I've paired it with Dr. Sleep. Now I was tempted with Dolores Claiborne to go for 1922 because of the well, or the importance of a well in both stories. But actually I thought Dr. Sleep was a better pairing because Well, both of these are sort of redemption stories. Both of these about trying to get past demons from your past and work through difficult family relationships and overcoming personal demons as well at times. So yeah, I just think they work really well, and they're both incredibly compelling stories. The three more left for you in this collection of twinners. I'm going to start with Insomnia, which I have paired with Do McKee. And I've put these two together really because they're about loss and moving on and recovery. And both have some really fucking weird shit in them as well, all connected to that changing state of personal circumstances. So they're not the most obvious of pairings, but I think they work. I think we get away with it. And next up, I've got Rose Madder, which I have paired with Sleeping Beauties, mainly because in both of these books, very women-driven. We have people going between different worlds, and we've got a lot of anger in both of these books, justified anger, and big decisions to make about what you want to do once everything has been resolved. Rose Madder, I think, is far better than this, and this has a far scarier antagonist in it. But again, as a twinning, and as a slightly unusual twinning, I think they work. And fittingly, the 19th pairing I'm going to come to in this video is the one that really sparked the idea. We've got Desperation and the Regulators. This is a literal twinning pair of books. This under Bachman, this under King. Same character names, but different iterations, different versions, and they are linked stories. They were put out on the same day with matching covers in the original hardbacks. They are the most obvious twinners in King's catalogue. So kind of had to include them, really. There you go, 19 twinners for you. Okay, those are some of my suggested twinners, but let me know your ideas. Which books would you pair together? And hey, I maybe will revisit this next year and pick up from the mid-90s onwards and see where we get to. Do, when you're leaving your comments, do check out in the description links to my Stephen King trivia book, to my fiction, to my newsletter, to the Constant Writers podcast, to my Letterboxd profile, and to my Instagram profile where I'm at Dave Musson. All of those are ways in which you can come and say hi and maybe support some of what I do if you feel like it. Next up, we're back in the movies. We're back in 1990 and we're checking in with our number one fan.